So, we're going to get started this morning talking about, like I said, Jesus. So, let's see. Yeah, we'll be discussing, like I said, the second person of the Trinity, which is God the Son, better known to us as Jesus. Jesus, without a doubt, is the most polarizing figure in all of human history. If you bring up his name in conversation, you're likely to get a full range of reactions. So some people will get excited, tell you what Jesus has done for them. Some people will get upset and try to shut the conversation down quickly. Some people will tell you he's not real, he's a myth, he's a legend. He's a made-up story. Other people would just tell you, he was a prophet, he was a good prophet, he was a good teacher, stuff like that. But today, we're going to talk about who was Jesus. Did he really exist? Was he really God in the flesh? And did he really rise from the dead? These are three main claims when it comes to Jesus. Now, truth of the matter is, even his name is controversial. You say Jesus, there's this new trend that I've noticed now to call him Yeshua. Have y'all heard that? Yeshua or Yeshua, whatever. Yeshua, Iesus. Of course, we know our Hispanic brethren calls him Jesus. And I know some people, if you say Jesus, they get mad. Or his name was Yeshua because the J didn't exist in the Greek, so he wouldn't actually call him Jesus. Let me dispel this right now. What's my name? Lorenzo. Do y'all know what that means?
No.
Okay. So Lorenzo in the English translates to Lawrence. Lorenzo comes from the root Laurentius. Now, whether you use Laurentius, whether you use Lawrence, or whether you use Lorenzo, they all translate to the same thing. It means crowned with laurels. Crowned with laurels, if you know anything about Roman culture, okay, y'all remember old school Olympics, where if you won, they put the crown of laurels on your head? That's literally what it means. So it's a sign of victory, a sign of honor or achievement. So it doesn't matter if you say Lorenzo, Laurentius, or Lawrence. The meaning is the same. So it doesn't matter if you call him Jesus, Yeshua, Iesu, or Joshua, which actually means the same thing. It's the same name. They all mean they all mean God saves or God is salvation. They all mean the same thing. So here's the deal. If you call him Jesus, or if you call him Yeshua, if you call him Iesu, whichever one, he knows who you're talking to. Exactly. See, that's what I'm trying to tell you. But he knows exactly who you're talking to. So it doesn't matter what you call him as long as God understands what you mean when you call on his name. You got it? So, but like I said, just even among Christians, you'll get different views of as far as who, or I should say, Christians. You'll get different views of who Jesus is based on their doctrine, their theology, stuff like that. Some people will say he was God in the flesh. Some people will say he's, son of God, just like we are sons and daughters of God. They'll say he was a spirit brother of Adam. Anybody ever heard that one before? Okay, yeah, it's a lot of wacky stuff out there. But many people don't believe that Jesus actually existed or that he lived. Like I said earlier, they think he's a concept or a fable used to push the gospel narrative. But the reality is, a lot of people don't know, there's a ton of evidence that show that Jesus actually did exist, that he was a real person. We're just going to go through a little bit of it today, but I, encourage you to do more research into this in your own personal study. But I'm going to make 3 points that will prove his historicity. Amen? First of all, the word says that the natural precedes the spiritual. So I typically like to go to just a base level when I'm proving stuff. The fact that we're sitting in here right now proves that Jesus existed because Christianity exists. I was expecting a much bigger reaction. But Christianity exists. We know Buddha was real because the teachings of Buddhism exist. We know Muhammad was real because the religion of Islam exists. We know that Confucius was real because the teachings of Confucianism exist. So likewise, Jesus had to been, no one questions the fact that they were real. But the same way we should know that Jesus existed because Christianity itself actually exists. But I understand that's too base level for some people. So let's go deeper. The other reason why we know he exists is, I guess I do have a slide for that. I was wondering. Okay. Yeah, we know that Jesus exists because Christianity exists. Next is the Gospels. We have 4 books: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These Gospels were written within the lifetime of the people that actually walked and talked with Jesus. So when we covered the history of the Bible in week 1, y'all remember I showed y'all the dates of when each book of the New Testament was written. And we talk about Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I think the first one, I forget which gospel it was, but the first one begins to pop up around, and all these dates are approximate. I think it was between 50 and 60 AD, which is within 30, the first one pops up around 25 to 30 years after Jesus' death. And I know for some people that seems like a long time, but y'all do realize 9/11 happened almost 25 years ago? And I talked about how you may not remember what you did on March 2nd, 1993, but you know exactly where you were on September 11, 2001, because those type of things get seared into your brain and you're able to recall vividly what was going on, what happened. So if you walked for 3 years with a real person, performing miracles, raising the dead, crucified, comes back, don't you think you could recall everything that happened even 30 years later? So, but the Gospels refer to the events that these individuals actually lived through and witnessed. So all of the Gospels, we know who wrote them, even though their names technically aren't ascribed to them. So if we talk about Matthew was an actual disciple, so later to become an apostle. He was a tax collector that walked with Jesus. Mark, if you look at the book of Acts, it's John Mark, who was the cousin of Barnabas. He actually also traveled with Peter. So Mark's book is based on Peter's recollections. Luke was a doctor, and he actually basically did like a deep dive, interviewed everybody and stuff. He wasn't one of the apostles, but he interviewed all the people that were around during Jesus, that actually saw Jesus, live and talk with him. So he put together the only chronologically ordered account of Jesus. And then John, who was also actually a disciple. I'm sorry, Matthew. So yeah, the first one started popping up here, like I said, about 20 to 30 years after Jesus' death. So like I said, we have accounts about Jesus in each one of these Gospels. And some people don't trust these accounts of Jesus because they, because they think that they're the only source material that we have for Jesus. So they think basically it's rigged, so to speak. They think that there's collusion about, as far as the 4 Gospels are concerned. But the question is, are there any references outside of the Bible that refer to Jesus? We're going to take a look at some of those today. Again, this is just a small sampling. I couldn't go through all of them, but I pulled some of the most compelling compelling sources. So let's take a look. First one comes from this gentleman, Flavius Josephus. You may have heard of Josephus. Josephus was a Roman historian in the 1st century. For those of y'all that don't know, 1st century will be within the time that Jesus lived. Jesus was died in 30 to 33 AD, 1st century. Again, his disciples would have been establishing the church in the 1st century. So he was a Roman Jewish historian. He wrote a volume of books called The Antiquities of the Jews. So Jesus is mentioned in books 18 and books 20 of his volume. So let's take a quick look to see what Josephus has to say and parse out the historicity in what he's saying. About this time, there lived a wise man, if indeed one ought to call him a man, for he was one who performed surprising deeds and was a teacher of such people as accept the truth gladly. He won over many Jews and many of the Greeks. He was the Messiah. And when upon the accusation of the principal men among us, Pilate had condemned him to a cross. Those who had first come to love him did not cease. He appeared to them, spending a 3rd day restored to life. For the prophets of God had foretold these things, and 1,000 other marvels about him. And the tribe of the Christians, so called after him, has still to this day not disappeared. And that is in Antiquities, 1868, chapter 18, what is that, volume 18? 1863. But again, we see a few things. Again, Josephus was in the 1st century. They lived Jesus, a wise man. And the people that I'm telling you about were not believers. They were just historians. So it's not like this narrative was about, it's not like he was a Christian spouting a narrative. None of the people that I'm sharing with you were actually Christians. One source is actually hostile to Christians. So again, these are what they have to say, totally unbiased. But so from this we can see that Jesus lived. He was considered a wise man. He performed surprising deeds. This would probably talk about the miracles and different things that he did. He was called the Messiah. He won over many Jews and many of the Greeks. So it wasn't just the Jews that believed in him. We know that those Jews that believed in Jesus become Christians. But before the apostles actually start evangelizing, he won over many of the Greeks. We see here, he confirms that Pilate condemned him to a cross. We see here that he confirms he appeared to them spending a 3rd day restored to life. So this talks about him being crucified, buried, rising on the 3rd day, coming back. And again, just like I was saying earlier, the tribe of Christians, so-called after him, still exists to this day. We know that Christianity, Jesus existed because Christianity still exists. That wasn't his only reference. He has another one. This is same from Antiquities of the Jews, same one, 2200. Having such a character, Ananias thought that with Festus dead and Albinus still on the way, he would have the proper opportunity. Convening the judges of the Sanhedrin, he brought forth the brother of Jesus, who was called the Christ, whose name was James, and certain others. He accused them of having transgressed the law and delivered them up to be stoned. But those of the city, residents who deemed the most fair-minded and who were strict in observing the law, were offended at this. Accordingly, they secretly contacted the king, Herod Agrippa II, urging him to order Ananias to desist from any more such actions, for he had not been justified in what he had already done. So again, there's several different things that we can learn from what he wrote about. This doesn't talk to Jesus directly, but we do see Jesus' brother James. So you can't have a brother unless you're a real person. So we know that brother James would have also been with his brother Jesus. The book of James, same person. We know that James, they wanted to stone him. This would have been the Jewish Sanhedrin that they were talking about. So the Jewish leaders wanted to stone James. Again, for those of y'all that may not know, after Jesus died, Christianity gets established. Christianity was not treated or was not received well by the powers that be, especially Roman leaders and Jewish leaders. So they had a hard time, and this also confirms that. But some of the fair-minded basically talked, and Ananus, who I believe was probably the head of the Jewish council at the time, had to talk him down. We also see Herod Agrippa II, who's also mentioned in Scripture. So we can pull all these different details out of these historical records. Everybody with me? All right, let's keep going. Publius Cornelius Tacitus. Publius Cornelius Tacitus. He was a Roman historian and a senator. He wrote a book called the Annals that talks about the burning of Rome under Nero and the persecution. How many people have heard of Nero?
Who?
Nero, the Roman Emperor Nero, the one that accidentally burned Rome. So this is one of the things that he mentions. Nero, when he set fire to Rome, he was actually one of the worst emperors that Rome had. When he set fire to Rome, used the Christians as a scapegoat. He basically blamed it on the Christians instead of himself. But let's look at what Tacitus has to say. Here's what he wrote. Consequently, to get rid of the report, Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians, by the populace. Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilate. And a most mischievous superstition, thus checked for the moment, again broke out not only in Judea, the first source of the evil, but even in Rome, where all things hideous and shameful from every part of the world find their center and become popular. So as you can tell, he was not exactly a fan. But again, we learned some things. Like I just said, Nero wanted to blame the fire on the Christians. We know, again, Christians were tortured and were persecuted. Christus, again, which would be a name for Christ, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty. So again, this goes back to the crucifixion. Again, we see Pontius Pilate, so we know that Pontius Pilate was there, and that he did, in his role, order the crucifixion of Jesus. Again, we know that Christianity existed because, Christ is real because the Christians actually existed. We see that Christianity not only broke out in Judea, but also in Rome. So we see the beginnings of how Christianity began to spread. So that's Tacitus. I got one more for y'all. Gaius Suetonius Tranquillus. Gaius Suetonius Tranquillus, known as Suetonius. Suetonius belonged to the equestrian order of Roman society and held various government roles, including private secretary to Emperor Hadrian. This would have been in 117 to 38 AD. There's a couple of references that he has that are very compelling as well. Let's see. There's one, and this just confirms something that Scripture also talks about. Suetonius, he basically kept a record on Claudius. So in his book, Divus Claudius, in his work Divus Claudius, Life of Emperor Claudius, Suetonius writes that Emperor Claudius banished from Rome all the Jews who were continually making disturbances at the instigation of one Christus. This would confirm what's written about by Luke in the book of Acts. And he found a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, having recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla. For those that don't know, Rome is in Italy. With his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had commanded all the Jews to leave Rome. So here we see corroboration and a source outside of the Bible that confirms what's inside the Bible. All right? Now, like I said, there's a lot of other references. You can look those up on your own time. Just confirmation of Jesus outside of the Bible, and it will pull up a whole lot of stuff. But like I said, I just wanted to pull some of the most compelling references to prove. So when people say that Jesus didn't exist, that he wasn't a real person, history does not say that. History does not point to that reality. Before I move on, we've established that Jesus is a real person. But I had to bring up one last important point. We know that Jesus was real. However, there's some things that he was not. This ain't Jesus. For the record, that ain't him. No, baby, he wasn't. He was not some lily white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed dude just walking around Judea. That's not who he was. Christianity did not reach Europe until around 300 BC. So that's about 270 years after Jesus is dead and gone. So Jesus did not look like that. Geographically, it would have been impossible. If you understand where Israel is and where it sits, the people there are of color. They wouldn't be white. He would have burned to a crisp. All right? Out there in that Judean sun. You don't hide this dude in Ethiopia. I mean, in Egypt. When they were killing babies and his parents took him down to Ethiopia. You don't hide this dude in Ethiopia. There's a reason why you don't make James Bond black. A black James Bond gonna stand out everywhere. Let's just keep it a buck. So, he's not white, he's not European or Italian. However, pump the brakes. There's something else that Jesus was not. He wasn't black. And I know that a lot of people will say that the Bible says that. So y'all know what I do. Let's go to the Bible and take a look. Let's see what it actually says, shall we? This is Revelation 1:13-16. And this is what everybody brings up when they say that Jesus is black. All right? Well, let's look at this carefully. And in the middle of the lampstands, this is John. He has a revelation about the end time. And in this particular part, he sees Jesus. Okay? Pick up verse 13. And in the middle of the lampstands, I saw one like a son of man, which is one of the titles that they usually use for Jesus. One like a son of man, clothed in a robe reaching to the feet and wrapped around the chest with a golden sash. His head and his hair were white like wool, like snow, and his eyes were like a flame of fire. His feet were like burnished bronze when it has been heated to a blow in the furnace, and his voice was like the sound of many waters. In his right hand, he held 7 stars, and out of his mouth came a sharp, two-edged sword, and his face was like the sun shining in its strength. Okay. Now, normally when people talk about Jesus was black, they go to this feet were like burnished bronze, right? Everybody's heard that. Again, let's work our way down. Let's look at this text critically, okay? In the middle of the lampstand, I saw one like the Son of Man, so we know he's talking about Jesus. Read 14. Everybody, read 14 out loud.
His hair, like snow.
You stop. Oh, okay, yeah, you're right. Okay. So, people will talk about this and say they're talking about the texture because, we have kinky hair, our hair resembles wool. Is that what the author's talking about? He's referencing the color. His head and his hair were white like wool, like snow. That's the differentiator. So we know that he's not talking about the texture of his hair. He's talking about the color of his hair. All right? So Jesus is an old dude. All right, so he's a black old dude. Let's continue. His eyes were like flame of fire. So was Jesus getting high? Is that why his eyes were red? His eyes were red like fire. So Jesus had red eyes. Y'all ever seen anybody with red eyes? Y'all seen a black dude with red eyes?
Yeah.
Well, and again, have you seen a dude that wasn't on weed? I know. Red eyes. Okay. His feet, his eyes were like flame of fire. His feet were like burnished bronze when it has been heated to a glow in a furnace. What color is burnished bronze? Okay. But what color is burnished bronze when it has been heated to a glow in a furnace?
Red.
That is burnished bronze in a furnace. Y'all seen any black people with that skin color? I'm just checking. Let's keep going. His voice was like the sound of many waters, so Jesus had that harmony all in himself. In his right hand held 7 stars. Out of his mouth came a sharp, 2-edged sword. You ever seen any black dudes with a sword tongue? Just killing people, just stabbing them. And his face was like the sun shining in its strength. What color is the sun?
Yellow.
When you ever looked up at the sun like midday, you look up and it's so bright when you blink you start seeing white all over the place. Maybe I'm tripping. Is this the description of a black man? So it's important when we read, y'all, read in full context and clearly understand. Sometimes I know for me, I have to reread. But we can't cherry pick the stuff that we like in order to fit our narrative. I am a black man. I would love the fact that Jesus was black. Trust me, nobody more than me. But I have to be true to the text. All right? So, here's another important note. Now, I was an art major in school. I mentioned that the first week of the inaugural service. I actually have a degree in studio art. So one of the classes I had to take was art history. In art history, you know what we learned? Because we talked about imagery of Jesus. Because we talked about this imagery and why this permeated the way it did, right? Because if you see Jesus, even if you know that he wasn't white, when you see Jesus, what do you tend to see? See this dude. Who are these people?
People.
No, who are they?
Interpretations of Jesus.
Every last one is Jesus. We learned in our history, every culture that tried to depict Jesus depicted him as themselves. We got Armenian Jesus, he may be a Kardashian. We got short neck afro Jesus. We got Native American Jesus right here. These are close. We got Leonardo da Vinci Jesus right here. That's OG Jesus right there. And Pope Jesus. Pope Jesus. Every culture depicted Jesus as themselves when they tried to create him. Some of the earlier, even the imagery was so strong though, because even these are somewhat similar. But if we look at the earliest depictions of Jesus, these are some of the earliest depictions of Jesus. This dude bold. He looked like an Egyptian, to be honest with you. This dude looks Roman. I can't even tell what that is, but he does look like a stick figure. But one of the reasons why, these versions of Jesus permeated so much, as we know, the Europeans colonized a large portion of the world. Anybody ever heard of the Renaissance? Not the Harlem Renaissance, the one before that, the Renaissance. They would have depicted Jesus that way. And then as the world gets colonized, this becomes a dominant image and starts influencing art moving forward. So, but none of these are actually what Jesus looked like. We don't know what Jesus looked like. But one more thing I want to iterate from Scripture. Exodus 24. You shall not make for yourself an idol or any likeness of what is in heaven above or on the earth beneath or in the water under the earth. There shouldn't be any pictures of Jesus anyway. We don't know what he looked like. He looked like whatever Jews looked like during that time period. Yeah. We don't know. He could have looked like Saddam Hussein. He could have looked like, short throw Jesus. We don't know. But we do know this confusion should have never even started. For those of y'all that know me, and I want you to think very carefully, and I'm not against them, so if you do it, this is no shade. Anybody ever seen me wear a cross?
No.
You know what my cross is? My lifestyle.
You better say it.
The early Christians didn't wear crosses. It was their lifestyle that made them peculiar. God gave the Jews all those laws so they would stand out amongst the nations that they were going into. Now again, if you wear a cross, that's no knock on you. I'm not telling you to get rid of your cross. That's not what you're missing the point. My point is, stop putting fish on your car. Stop putting Jesus is Lord bumper stickers. If your lifestyle doesn't line up, you're just doing Christianity a disservice anyway.
There you go.
Come on, sir.
So let your lifestyle be your cross. If someone wants to know what Jesus looks like, let them see it in you and how you treat people and how you act and how you conduct yourselves. That's the image of Christ that the Bible talks about. That's what we should be concerned about. Not if he was black, if he was white, all that stuff doesn't matter.